monthly community safety forums that we've been holding for the last year. We'll take a little pause this summer because it is Vermont in the summer, and we'll pick those back up in September. And then the final piece, which is an important one in terms of state policy, I just want to provide some reflections. As the legislature wrapped up in just the last couple days or so, H91 was a really important bill, which was the only bill related to addressing homelessness crisis here in the state of Vermont. And I'm very frustrated to see that the governor decided to veto that one and only piece of legislation that's attempting to talk about homelessness and the crisis that is really statewide. So this is concerning because this was the #1 issue that both city councilors and myself as mayor decided that this was the #1 priority for the city of Burlington. We've been disproportionately holding this crisis on behalf of the entire state, with a high number of people experiencing homelessness, relocating to Burlington, trying to survive outside because we have maxed out shelter beds long ago, and we do not have the kind of critical partnership and, most importantly, solutions on the state level that we've been calling for now months and months. And it is deeply disappointing that this ended with basically putting us back to where we started in the beginning of the legislative session. I've been asking for the governor, I've been asking for state legislators to be helping be stronger partners in solving this issue, making sure that we're mindful of when anytime there's a significant exit from the motel program, which is the General Assistance Emergency Program run by the state, that has a disproportionately negative impact on our community, and of course the individuals being exited. We again are facing another exit date on July 1st due to no changes being done because, again, this bill was vetoed, but also additional solutions were not even in that piece of legislation to support people experiencing homelessness. And the most troubling part about this next exit is that a number of the highest vulnerable people in our state are part of that population. This includes families with young children, includes people who are medically vulnerable, will now be exiting from that program and have nowhere to go. And so we are trying to begin planning for that here in Burlington. How do we support these folks so that they can help get their basic needs met? But I want to emphasize our shelter beds are still maxed out. We have the highest number of people trying to survive outside than ever before in Burlington. This is an incredible pressure on our city. So I again call on the governor. If the H91 was not the right solution, then what is? I also call the legislature to continue to push for solutions that help us right now. This H91 bill was really designed about a year out from now, redesigning that General Assistance Emergency Program, which would still be helpful, but it didn't solve some of the immediacy of the challenges we're facing here as a community in Burlington. And I know this is shared by other mayors across Vermont of larger communities as well. We talk about this in the Vermont Mayors Coalition a lot. Communities are also seeing people unsheltered in their streets for the first time, including places like Newport, Vermont, which has never seen this before. So on that somber note, I'm going to bring us into the remarks and the focus of our press briefing today. And first up, we're going to hear from Interim Chief of Police Sean Burke, who's going to highlight a few important updates from the Burlington Police Department, including our summer deployment plan, our new recruitment strategies for hiring new officers to the DPD as we continue to rebuild that department, and also our pre-charge program. Chief Burke.
Morning, everybody. Can you hear me all right? I assume. Sean Burke, and I'm the privilege of serving as the city's interim police chief. Here first to talk about our summer deployment strategy. So as we've spoken with a lot of our media partners previously this spring, we have really leaned in on data. We've identified a number of hot spots within the city, and we've focused our limited resources in terms of sworn officers and community service officers in two different ways. One, in civic areas such as City Hall Park and on the marketplace. You'll see our staff out there doing a number of foot patrols, and then we use the same resources, the same human resources in another manner. It's a bit of a nomenclature difference in directed patrol, so that's motorized areas of other areas. Best example of that I can use is in the parking garages. So we have our community support officers supporting the parking team and the security measures within the garage. The distinction is important when we really kind of drill down on the data to make sure that we're being efficient and effective with our limited resources. So again, these parameters are examined on somewhat of a weekly basis, but we'll be publishing internally monthly patrol strategy plans in order to meet the public safety needs of the community moving forward. I would also like to talk about our recruitment strategy. I think first it's important to highlight that we have hired a new Deputy Chief of Operations. That person, his name is John Young. He formerly formerly served with the City of Burlington Police Department before retiring in 2021. He will be joining us in an interim role on June 30th. It affords us immediate capacity as a leadership team, and it allows us to be very intentional in succession planning. And what I mean by that is we have amazing talent in our organization, and it's time to develop them as leaders to roll into these jobs that are now held in an interim capacity. The BPD has had a long history of being a factory, if you will, of producing great leaders, and we're going to fire that factory back up. So under the leadership of John Young, I know that the patrol division is going to become highly effective and even much more efficient and committed to the work. Second to that is an overall recruitment strategy. The City of Burlington has invested a lot of fiscal resources in the Burlington Police Department in order to really address what I would refer to as a sworn officer staffing crisis. This is something that's felt across the country. There's just fewer people doing this work, and that trend started back in 2014. And what first struck me when I joined the BPD for the second time is that we weren't necessarily marketing in the right spaces, given the demographic. I'm a little bit fortunate. I'm the parent of an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old, so I understand how they look for jobs. It's not on television ads generally. I'm sorry to our media partners. It's not usually in print ads. Sorry to our newsprint partners, but rather it's leaning in on the social media aspect. So that is a huge part of our focus, along with working with a marketing firm that does targeted digital pop-up advertisements. And what that affords us to do, by way of example, is when we know we're going to go to a certain college or place with our recruitment team, we can geofence the area, target it in the days leading up, and then target it in the ensuing days after we're there to see the click-through rate to our recruitment page. And then we can use those fiscal resources in a very effective and directive way. We also really need to tell the story about why it's great to be a Burlington cop. So this is something that I've been sharing with our staff. We're all there for specific reasons. If you want really a meaningful municipal police career in this state, Burlington's the place to be. We need to tell that story, and we also need to wet that with the marketing around how great Burlington is. And I feel that the energy is starting to really kind of change in that regard, and it's incumbent on the police department to illustrate our commitment to safety, because safety provides the environment for vibrancy. And that's what the city is really postured for, and I feel that we're going in that direction in a quick way. And then lastly, I'll talk about our commitment to reconnecting really with our Community Justice Center and our pre-charge program. So over the last few years, for a lot of different reasons, lower level crimes haven't been necessarily investigated or referred to either if we make an arrest in those cases for restorative justice process, or really operationalizing the parallel justice program, which is hugely important when you think about affected parties, crime victims, having just a space to talk about their experience and what that meant to them. And then in terms of our commitment to restorative justice, we know that if we can get someone to take responsibility for their actions, and they can hear from the person that they impacted and then the broader community about how their impulsive decision really negatively impacted, we typically don't see high recidivism in that population. So again, there's more work to be done in engineering the processes between our two entities, because the Community Justice Center actually lives within CEDO as opposed to within the police department, so there's some information and technology sharing barriers there that we're working through right now, but I'm very hopeful in that work, and as you'll hear, how that dovetails with a new initiative from the City Attorney's Office. So, thank you.
All right, thank you, Chief. Our next update is going to be on a new initiative that we're calling City Circles. This update is going to be provided by our City Attorney, Jessica Brown, and supported by one of our Assistant City Attorneys, Emmett Hood, as well as Becky Pemberley, who works for the Community Justice Center. But we're going to begin with the City Attorney, Jessica Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everyone. Since stepping into the position of City Attorney in August 2024, I have been involved in many discussions with the administration, with department heads and city staff, and with city councilors about what we can do to more effectively address conduct that rises to the level of violating city ordinances. The idea of City Circle emerged from those discussions. In the mid-1990s, the state established the Judicial Bureau civil violations at both the state and the municipal level. I think any BPD patrol officer could tell you about issuing someone a ticket for a civil ordinance violation and watching that person tear it up and throw it away. And I think if you think about it, we can all recognize that having the Judicial Bureau enter a default judgment against someone whose basic needs are not met and imposing a fine that that person will have no ability to pay is of little impact of consequence to that person. Additionally, the Judicial Bureau is not positioned or equipped to try to address the underlying issues that are typically the cause of problematic behavior. So we know that the approach that we have been taking is not working. In the past, the City Attorney's Office prosecuted its own ordinance violations, and we are still empowered to do so through state and city law, as well as establishing penalties. Unlike the Judicial Bureau, our Community Justice Center is positioned to work with people to try to address their needs and adjust their behavior to repair any harm that they've caused within our community. So City Circle will involve the City Attorney's Office resuming the practice of prosecuting criminal ordinance violations for conduct such as littering, public possession and consumption of alcohol, unlawful trespass, unlawful mischief, disorderly conduct, etc., for which the first response will be an invitation to engage in City Circle. This will be a pilot program focused on conduct in the core downtown area. Momentarily, I'm going to invite Becky Penworthy from the Burlington Community Justice Center to share details about what a City Circle process will involve. But I will explain now that if people charged with criminal ordinance violations do not engage with the City Circle, the City Attorney's Office, by prosecuting these violations ourselves, will have the power to file those violations in the Superior Court and, if need be, as a last resort, request warrants to get people to appear. And I intentionally say as a last resort because I do want to emphasize that the goal of the City Circle, a restorative process, is not to drag people to court, it's not to put anyone in jail, it's not to saddle anyone with a criminal conviction. The goal is to connect and engage with people and provide them with the support that they need to build their capacity to be accountable for any harm that their behavior is causing in the community. So even if the only way to connect with someone is by getting them into court, the ultimate goal will be to have them engage with the City Circle. Assistant City Attorney Anna Wood has drafted an ordinance that will establish the City Circle, and in the coming months, the City Attorney's Office will plan to present that draft ordinance to City Council in July, with the hope that the Ordinance Committee will consider and take action on the ordinance and get it back to the City Council in August, such that once passed, the ordinance can take effect by the end of September. By which time, we also hope to be able to stand up the actual City Circle process, so I will turn to Becky Penworthy from the Burlington Community Justice Center to talk about what that would look like.
So I would say that City Circles are a rapid response to harm and crime, and also a rapid response to someone who's been impacted by that crime. So, for example, a person is riding their bicycle down Church Street. We see this every day for those of us who are on Church Street. And in this moment, they inadvertently hit a person who's walking on the street. That could be some sort of municipal violation, and that person is then addressed by someone from the Burlington Police Department because this victim has made a complaint or it was witnessed by others. The person, we call them the responsible party, would be immediately referred to a rapid restorative process that we're calling City Circle. That City Circle would be comprised of people from the Burlington Community Justice Center, the law enforcement officer or community service officer if they wanted to be involved, the victim if they wanted to be involved, as well as volunteers from the downtown center. Because this is a downtown center pilot, we are hoping to have folks from our stores, folks who live in the downtown center, and others who spend more time down here. We would meet together with this person if they were available to do that and able to do that, and talk committed their violation or their crime, we would want to attend to those underlying needs and address that substance use problem so that we could mitigate the potential for that happening in the future.
Okay. Thank you very much, City Attorney Brown and Becky. I appreciate that detailing. We'll have questions at the end of this, of course, on the city circle. I'm really hopeful that this is a piece. And the reason why the timeline that the city attorney outlined is when we have something in ordinance, there is a process, several readings of an ordinance change, as well as a 30-day.
Once, it has to go to the city council twice.
Right.
In between, it will go to the ordinance committee. So in July, we hope to get it in front of the city council for a first reading and referral to the ordinance committee. Some of the timeline will depend on how long the ordinance committee takes to turn it around. If they review it in one meeting and approve it and send it back to the council, that could happen. I think there are a couple of ordinance committee meetings scheduled in July and August, so realistically, I think we're thinking that by August, the ordinance can be referred back to council, and if they pass it at that time, then it would be on the 21st day after they pass it, it would take effect.
30 days, 21 days. That is our process for updating local municipal ordinance. So thank you for that update again on city circles. A good complement to city circles is now the situation table. What we've talked about, what you've heard is how do we start to mitigate people's harm on our community, either from their behaviors or whatnot. And one of the pieces that you'll hear as a theme between city circles and the situation table is when people's basic needs are not met, it increases their risk level. It increases the risk level of what behaviors they'll have that will be harmful to the community or to themselves. But also when we look at the social determinants of health and what causes people to do unhealthy behaviors or be unhealthy themselves, often it's about looking at the fundamentals of basic needs not being met. So the situation table, again, I see as a real complement to city circles, and to speak on an update on that is Ingrid Jonas, who is the Senior Advisor on Community Safety in my office, and welcome to the night, Ingrid.
Great, thank you. I have some handouts.
Good morning. So since I started in September, I've been involved in many conversations around how can we improve service delivery in the justice system and beyond to be more efficient and less siloed, and where organizations are working together more effectively. And several of us from the city and different nonprofits in the community had this opportunity provided by the state of Vermont to go and observe and audit this model called situation tables. This is new to Vermont, but it is not new. It's been around since 2011. It started in the city of Prince Edward in the province of Saskatchewan, Canada, and it involves data collection and really evaluating things to know that it's measurable. It's new to Vermont, but not at all a new concept. There are about 40 tables, about 100 tables in Canada, 40 tables in the U.S., with 4 of those already in Vermont. And so we asked if we could be one of the communities to obtain this training and try this in Burlington, based on the enthusiasm, support from the mayor, support from the state, and all the folks who had a chance to audit it and say enthusiastically, we want to try this here. So we have the training starting next week. It's a 2-day training. We have 60 folks already signed up with registrations still coming in. And this represents a wide array of government and community-based organizations. What the table actually is kind of a strange name, and I keep hearing myself say situation table like every day a million times. But what it is a way to bring together multiple organizations in a structured way to problem solve in a more efficient way. So it's not creating anything new per se, and it's not taking anything away. It's not replacing
service. They do not have the time or the bandwidth to really case coordinate at a high level. There is certainly case coordination going on, and I'm not undermining that that's already happening. But this is an enhanced way for a wider array of service providers to get together at a table in a structured way every week and look at problems and solve them together. So there can be a situation that's brought to the table by an organization. Each organization works within their own legal scope around information sharing, so no one is having to go outside of their own policies or procedures. A team will be assembled based on the need and the risk that's presented by the situation. And this could be a risk that somebody could be causing harm in the community, or could be at extreme risk themselves. It could be a family, it could be a child, it could be a general situation in Burlington that a number of agencies are dealing with, and the table provides a structure to address it in an efficient way. And there's also added benefits. There's a sort of accountability, sort of a professional accountability that happens when you are at a weekly meeting regularly with your colleagues and you signed on to solve a certain problem together. Nobody wants to come to the table right here without having done their part, being the team responder to address the situation. So just a lot of good feedback from around Vermont and beyond this model. Again, breaking down silos. The different groups get to know each other's expertise, and they deepen their knowledge base about the services that are provided. A lot of folks don't know, different groups don't necessarily know all the nuances. People don't know about the CJC per se. They may have misperceptions about it. Same with the police department. All of these folks are integral parts of the situation table in order for it to be effective. More respect is gained around each other's knowledge base and expertise. And the data piece, I think, is so important and makes it different than other case collaboration efforts. So there's data reporting that occurs where risks are documented in a community, and whether and how the teams are able to reduce the risk that a person or family is experiencing. So there is that accountability, and then that collection of data. And that collection of data can be happening in Burlington and the other communities around the state that are standing up these tables or already have. So Rutland, Bennington, Brattleboro, and Springfield are already ahead of us. So it's pretty exciting and hopeful, and I'm happy to answer questions. I actually want to ask Becky too, because Becky is at the training. We audited training together with several other providers, and if there's anything you want to add.
Sure, thanks. I guess what I would add is, as someone who does some of the direct service to folks in the community, we don't always know who's working with who. So the situation table will allow us to understand where this person is getting other services, so that we're not duplicating those services, and we can support each other to do the services, as well as relationship building. So people who are service providers come and go and change positions, and we always need to be in some sort of relationship, so I can call you on the phone and say, hey, I have this case, can you help me with this? So I'm really kind of excited about the opportunity to serve people in this community in a new way that's more streamlined and supportive and in concert with the other providers.
I think it's really a testament to all of the good work that providers in this community are doing, that we would have this opportunity to just enhance the ability to work together and problem solve. Thank you.
Thank you, Ingrid. And to just wrap that up, because we held an informational meeting on June 2nd, I think, June 2nd. We had over 60 different entities there. So it ranged from UVM Medical Center to Burlington School District to Champlain Housing Trust to the Howard Center. It just starts to illustrate what we're talking about in terms of those critical community partners. And I got a lot of really positive feedback that this high level of organization, a different approach that just relentlessly brings people together to relentlessly do a level of intervention with folks who are causing harm in our community is a new model that will allow us to have less duplication, as Ingrid was saying. saying, and more strategy, frankly, for how we start to really address folks. One thing that was helpful for me to know is that structurally how this works, Ingrid mentioned it maybe weekly. Part of the impact of this is that there is a very short list of folks that they focus on every week so that they can be highly impactful. And there's a regimen, as Ingrid mentioned, that people will be identified as the lead entity to start that outreach to that individual after they do the risk assessment. And what Chief Burke would tell you is that out of the incident report numbers that we get every month or every week or every day, there is a disproportionately high number of people, a small number of people I should say, behind the high numbers of some of these incident reports. So said in another way, there's a small number, probably 20 to 30 people at most, who are behind a disproportionately high number of those incidences. And she could probably say them more in an articulated way than I have. But just understand that there's a few people who are constant repeaters in our emergency service system who, once we can identify them, then we refer to their situation table. The individual would not themselves be at the table, but then we talk about what are the risk factors around that individual. How do we bring that risk factor down? How do we bring the right players? So there'll be different people at the table for different people, of course, to again get back to helping to engage that person, hold that person accountable, support that person, whatever that might be, so that we bring that risk level down and they start causing less impact on our community. I'm very, very hopeful about this one. And this one, we have a 2-day intensive training next week planned, as Ingrid was saying, about 50 or probably even more RCPs about being trained so people can be participants at that table as critical partners, and then we'll get to work in July. And with that, anything else, team? Okay, we'll open it up for questions.
Based on the fact that this is already up and running in Brattleboro, Burlington, Springfield, what has been the feedback from those communities, and what have they already seen be the outcome of getting this started?
Yeah, so we've heard nothing but positive feedback. When we had the kickoff information session on June 2nd, some folks from Springfield came up and they talked about how never before has there been sort of this, everyone at the same table at the same time working on the same issue. And it's unlike anything they've tried before. And even folks who were sort of hesitant about it or concerned about some of the privacy issues that different organizations are constrained by, there are very professional workarounds for that doesn't violate any agency's policies, and it's really working. They're seeing that they're coordinating their efforts better. They're reducing incidents of crime and disorder in the community, and they're just learning a lot about how they, what the offerings are from other agencies. And that accountability piece too. One person described sort of, it's enhanced not only our duty to serve the community, but our responsibility to each other is stronger now. So that's just some of the feedback. There's an acknowledgement that no one agency can handle alone the problems of most folks. And so this just brings everyone at the same time to the same table. Instead of individually touching the leg of somebody and again, it's everyone together. So there's a synergy in that, I think.
For either for the mayor or for Chief Burke, you mentioned obviously doubling down on the number of patrols and folks in uniform and out of uniform in the marketplace here in City Hall Park. I know, at least from what I've heard from businesses and from the business community, they're already seeing a lot of that. Can you measure, or have you measured the effects of increasing those patrols already downtown? Can you talk about what changes we might have already seen from that?
That's a great question for the chief, since he looks at the data more frequently than I do.
Again, thanks for that question. Criminal justice data it's messy at times, so we want to count our foot patrols and our directed patrols so that will drive the overall sample size and upward. But then what we have to do is kind of look at what are we getting at in terms of reports of disorderly conduct, public drug use, that kind of thing. But we also have to distill off from that data set the number of times that officers are then generating incidents because they are addressing proactively disorderly conduct, drug use, public intoxication. So again, it's really tough to look at. We that sense. I'd rather kind of really push through with the strategy that we know is having a decent effect, at least on the overall lived experience in the community right now, through the summer, and then examine essentially what the data looks like in terms of what was reported to the police as opposed to what did the police address proactively, and then just kind of reflect and formulate further questions about patrol deployments from that point.
And I will just add, and then we'll go to you, Courtney, and I will just add that part of what we're really also doing with this redeployment or reuse of existing officers and CSOs and CSLs is to rebuild the trust in our community that we are responding, and we're trying new ways to respond so that folks, when they call for help or they have an issue, or even just that perception of safety that Burlington is really trying to get a handle on, to make it even just feel safer in the downtown. That is also just part of the strategies that the chief is putting into place. And on top of that, bringing us back to the time when Burlington had a more of a proactive community policing policy. So that is so critical for not only trust, but building relationships and building a level of certainty that you know where the police are and you can access them. But you also know where our other aspects of the community safety system exist as well. If sworn officers are not the appropriate response, or perhaps there is hesitation for whatever reason, that's also why in the new budget we're investing more money in a Howard Street outreach program, for example, that we can make sure that we're all coordinated and that we're all working in the same direction for more trust in the community, but better responsiveness that's appropriate to the incident. Courtney?
Yeah, just sort of curious if you or the chief or both could talk about how you were able to do this redeployment. I think in the past we were told for years that there aren't enough police officers to do these downtown patrols, and I don't really think that the headcount has grown all that much over the last few years. It's been like steadily growing, but up and down. We've been told in the past that, you know, can't adjust things without talking to the police union. They have certain agreements in their contracts. I'm just wondering, how are you able to do it now? What has changed?
So I'll briefly begin and then pass it back to the chief. But we obviously have a new chief who has different experiences and different expertise in how to utilize an existing force, actually a smaller force over in South Burlington. But it's also, I think, a reflection of willingness to try new things and a stronger partnership, I will say that, a stronger partnership between my office and clarity around my expectations of what we need to try to move this needle on community safety in a positive direction, and a chief willing to also adapt and try to innovate. I think that's a piece of it, but there is also just the operational side of it, which I'll let the chief address.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I'd say, to really get to the root of your question, is the police officers are really hungry to do this work. They see the crime and disorder, they're committed to public safety in the city of Burlington, and does it come at expense of other things? It does. You know, we don't have an officer in our typical 5 patrol areas that the city's been divided up in for decades upon decades. So are we more concentrated downtown? We are, but we have to use our finite resources, whether that's our limited sworn officers or our fully staffed community service officers and CSL team in concert with street outreach. We know the work is downtown. The officers understand that, and if we're proactive in that regard, we know we can reduce the number of more serious level of crimes. It's like the old school bar strategy that was deployed here in Burlington a long time ago. As opposed to waiting on the outskirts for the disturbances to happen at 2 in the morning, someone in a command position at that point said, how about we just put the cops in the problem area before the problem occurs and see what we can deter. And that's really the same logic here. But I really would like to applaud all the staff at the BPD because they were hungry to do this work. It was an easy ask.
Thank you, Chief. And I would just say, in a vibe check level, since I practically live down here at City Hall, welcome to my second house, I guess, that there is, I really want to appreciate the police officers, the CSOs, as well as our partners in street outreach, because there is, as the chief was saying, an eagerness to get out of the cruisers and to engage the public and do that level of community policing work, which not only brings us back to our roots, but is more responsive to the needs that they have seen, I'm sure, as professionals who care deeply about Burlington and wanting to make sure we have a better responsive system. And back to that vibe check, when I walk in the morning and I see officers out on foot patrol, I really think this is part of the morale boost as well, to make sure that they feel like they know their work is meaningful and valued, they are trying new things, they're being utilized in more strategic ways, and I can see it on their faces, honestly, in the morning, just around the more meaningful fulfillment that takes when they're actually out there, out of the cars and engaging with the community.
Just to ask quickly, Mayor, I know obviously in the past we've had the community safety forums with members of the public. What have you taken from those to get to, say, today? Do you have any specifics that you can point to that maybe you've heard and said, yeah, we got to do something about that, we do something about that? Have you taken any of that to get here today?
I have so many pieces of feedback that I receive as mayor, so it's not just the community safety forums. I've held countless meetings with different stakeholder groups in our community, ranging from young people who are, high schoolers are going to high school downtown at downtown BHS, to business leaders, to folks who just work downtown in general, and employees of a lot of our local businesses downtown. So lots and lots of feedback. And time and time again, what I've heard are sort of a few different themes. One is when I call for help, no one responds. There's sort of a clunkiness in the beginning when I came as mayor around information and even knowing who to call. So as we've been getting going with the things that were easier versus harder, and it was one of the recommendations out of the community safety advisors I convened last summer was, Mayor, please just give us a more clear way of knowing when this happens, who do I call? Because it doesn't always feel like a 911 call. Maybe police officers, I know in my gut, is not the appropriate call for someone who's having an acute mental health crisis but not hurting anybody. But I don't know how to reach street outreach. So we've updated, for example, the community safety guide, and that is widely distributed now, and we did 2 different updates because we kept hearing from folks at mayor meetups in all places, even outside those forums of, wait, you listened to the drug tip line? I didn't know that. What is the drug tip line? So we put a lot of things into that guide to help make sure that the information coming from the public is as useful as it can be for the city response. It's a two-way street or a 2-part relationship of making sure that we're getting good information in, directing it to the right, directly more appropriate response, and then the response being responding. That's a lot of responses, but like basically functioning better. And then, of course, the other piece is I've been hard at work looking at other communities and talking to other mayors, also with Ingrid's help, researching what else is out there outside of Burlington, because we are not at all the only community facing the compounding crises and the pressures from the last several years, including our homelessness crisis, our opioid crisis, the lack of mental health care, and very slow change, if at all, as I mentioned earlier, on the state level. So how have other places been innovating? And I've been very grateful to the city of Boston in particular, but also the city of Providence. Those mayors have been very generous with their teams. Boston has a similar position that Mayor Wu put in place when she became mayor several years ago. It's essentially what Ingrid is starting at here in Burlington. And they're more than willing to share strategies. The chief of staff for the public safety commissioner in Boston has been more than helpful to talk about police recruitment strategies. Boston's numbers also were dipping after 2020, as the chief said. Many communities are facing this same struggle. So that has been allowed us to start really exploring new things to bring online. And Boston, Chelsea, Mass specifically, but Boston now as a city of Boston, have used things like the situation table, and was one of the first cities to bring that online here in the States. So that's just an example of how we're learning, we're applying, and it takes a couple months to actually put things into place, and now we're at the point of launching.
Just want to clarify something which is that, was it that these meetings are going to be put on pause for the remainder of the summer, and kind of what is the reason that I know you mentioned not summer?
It's not raining today, and so people, even at my mayor meetup this morning, I only had like 3 people. I was like, what, is the sun out or something? You don't want to come talk to me? No, to clarify, what we're putting on hold just for 3 months is the community safety forums. So those are the every other month meeting we do with usually a panel and discussion with community. And that's also because we've been doing them for a year. It's twofold. One is I don't think we're going to get high participation in July. The second is we've done them now for a year. I think we're trying to innovate around how do we perhaps do a more interactive thing with the community 1 year in, but we're designing that now. But these monthly press briefings will continue. I hope you come. Okay, great. Anything else?
As it relates to the city circle, I think the phrase may have been rapid intervention, and if I'm making that encounter an individual, they're given a citation and they're referred to the city circle, almost at city table. How quickly are they then brought to that circle? Is it 2 days, 3 days? Because I know we've heard, at least when individuals commit a crime or something, they end up in court, next day they're out and they're doing the same thing. So how do you make sure that these individuals are getting to this circle before they can say recommit?
So we haven't launched it yet, but we can at least talk about our intention of the design, and of course, it's still going to go through the ordinance process for some of the details to be worked out. I don't know if Jessica or Becky want to speak.
I'll start. Rapid intervention is absolutely the right terminology. That's the goal. You talked about, sometimes people, when they're charged with a crime that goes to, directly to Superior Court, receive a citation and are released by the police and don't actually go to court for weeks or months. So the idea of the city circle is that it will be a much more rapid response. Structurally, infrastructure-wise, we have to put it together. But ideally, if someone was ticketed, on a Friday or Saturday, they would come to City Circle on Monday or Tuesday. I think ideally when Becky and I and others have talked about this, City Circle, once we stand it up, will be a regularly scheduled event on a weekly basis, on the same day of the week, in the same location, so people will start to know that if they receive a criminal ordinance violation citation and a notice inviting them to city court, that they have to show up at, whatever the location ends up being. Ideally, it'll be someplace easily accessible to folks who are spending their time in downtown, and it will come to be known by word of mouth, that you have to show up at City Circle on Monday in Contoy's Auditorium and meet with Becky. So yes, the goal is for it to be a regularly scheduled practice in the same location on the same day of the week, every week, and like I said, so ideally, depending on when someone gets a ticket, within a week they're at the City Circle, and not just being arraigned and told this is what you're being charged with, and now you're going to be released on conditions and back out into the community with often no additional services, but the intervention will begin at the City Circle the first day that they arrive.
Do you want to add? I just add a small thing. So when someone receives the notice that they've been invited to City Circle, it doesn't mean that they have to wait, right? So they would come to the City Circle, but in advance of that, they could reach out to the CJC, and also any victims related to that case, we would be reaching out to them in advance of the City Circle. So that sort of steps back that rapid response if there's a number of days between incident and City Circle schedule.
Just really quickly off of that, and I think I should be good, is the safeguards. You mentioned that last resort being a warrant. If an individual is given, I know we're talking hypotheticals here, but if an individual is given this invitation to City Circle, they don't show up. Are you immediately going to that warrant, or are you giving them a second referral? Are you trying to contact them in the community? Just confused or maybe questioning of would an individual really show up if they're just given the piece of paper, or will they rip it up like they had been before?
Well, I will start just by saying this won't work for every single person, but the goal here is more rapid response that's real time and more timely, of course, as I said before, but also this will work for some people, and it adds more steps in the process. But in terms of people who choose not to show up, I'll let the city attorney speak a little bit about that scenario.
I'll start by saying that, the Community Justice Center already has models of programs that they do this with. So, for example, if someone gets a noise ordinance violation ticket, they are invited to do a program through the Community Justice Center to minimize the fine that they might end up having to pay. And if they opt not to engage with the Community Justice Center, that civil violation ticket is forwarded to the Judicial Bureau, and it goes through that process. So similarly, if someone is ticketed with a criminal ordinance violation and invited to City Circle, if they don't show up, that ticket will land at the city attorney's office, and we will file it with the Superior Court. person will get a notice to appear in court, and if they don't appear in court, we will have the option to request a warrant. Does that
I think so.
answer? Okay,
Yes.
great.
Thank you.
And last important thing that Ingrid just mentioned, which is why I have a senior advisor on community safety, to whisper in my ear when necessary. Zooming out, it's important to understand that we're also trying to make sure that this is a piece of accountability that starts to change the culture and the expectations in our city. It is, part of this is just the perception, right, that you won't be held accountable, but now we're adding this new layer that will start to change the expectations here clearly. We will talk about this a lot. We will, as it's been mentioned, this is a weekly convening, so we'll start to shift a lot of what has been a bit of the challenge, where the perception is you can just do anything you want in Burlington. You can tag a building, you can do all these things. And for these lower level crimes, these municipal violations, this is a new level that is empowered by the city is able to do in advance that we are going to put online to both come at it from the perception side of things, but also an actual individual accountability side of things. Okay, perhaps one more question if there is one. So we're about out of time.
This question about, can you talk about what the city's posture will be this summer with homeless encampments? We've heard a lot about, tenting on the waterfront. Is the city going to be noticing those encampments? Is the city kind of seeing the waterfront as almost a sanctioned camping? I think the hygiene facilities will maybe restored there this summer. Just you can speak to that a little bit.
So we are now moving in the direction of sanctioned camping because what our focus needs to be is bringing more housing online, and shelter should always be a temporary solution. And so we're really trying to repeat things that we found did work last year. One of the things that I implemented as mayor that was different than prior administration is some basic needs, amenities down at the waterfront and also over, it's called Old Dump Road, which is the worst road ever, worst name ever. But anyway, over in the Old North End, where there have been long-standing campers for many years. The numbers have grown though. So we have, as a slight alteration already this year, put additional resources down because one porta potty is not enough. So we have a bit more there. That helps on a number of levels in terms of just basic public health and meeting basic needs. But it's for the folks who are having to live outside, which is the most important thing. The second and also important issue is city employees engage and have to often clean up areas, and to take that risk level down to make sure that people aren't handling literal human feces and whatnot, or trash and whatnot. That helps bring that risk level down for city employees. That worked well last year. We're continuing it this year. The other challenge, though, is, and that we're going to bring on with locations as soon as we can find one, is that there are additional issues that people are facing who are sheltering outside. For example, people have nowhere to put their stuff. So people, especially people who are rough sleeping, which is when people sleep outside in like the band shell at Battery Park, don't have a tent necessarily, and they'll move on. The insecurity of not having four walls around you is real for folks, with folks having their stuff stolen or not a place to leave it securely. So like in other communities, we're exploring how to do a safe storage location. We did run one when we ran the VFW shelter 2 winters ago, so we got to find a location for that. That would be a helpful new piece to bring online, especially with a high number of people experiencing homelessness right now and no shelter. The other piece ahead of that July 1st date is to find a place where we can identify and support as a safe parking location for overnight. Many people, especially people with young children who are unsheltered, often use their cars for shelter. And so knowing that there's a place that they can park that's not too off the beaten path, if you will, we're working on establishing where that could be, so that can be communicated and coordinated with folks, and that they will not be hassled on overnight. There will be some rules, of course, around that about when cars have to move out, coordination with our parking services, but those are the kinds of adaptations we're having to do because there is even more people living outside. We also might need to look a little bit at our public lands policy, and I've asked Sarah Russell, our advisor on, or specialist on ending homelessness, to also think about like where else can we be thinking about public lands, because I'm concerned around high concentrations of people. It creates social tension, right? And I want to make sure that we do things in a proactive way that de-escalates any scenario if possible. But we've done this work a year ago, and there's not a lot of places for people to be. Back to what I said in the very beginning of this, is why this is so critical that we actually look upstream for solutions and partner with the state and have the state help solve this, because this is a relentless, chronic, unsolvable issue as just the city alone. Okay, and with that, thank you very much for coming. Enjoy the sun while it's out there, and we'll see you again soon.